All right, government students, it's the last set of virtual notes for for Unit 1. This is Lesson 6, Constitutional Convention. Okay, we are going to be looking at the Constitutional Convention and really how they kind of work to resolve a lot of the issues that are around there. And a lot of this is going to be done in class, but we kind of have a basis and a background for that, which is what we're going to be covering here. So we're going to be looking at in class what are the compromises, how do the founders resolve all the issue of representation, the issue of slavery, and then there's the disagreement that pops up between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. What's the result of that? Okay, but a lot of these are going to be getting in class, and this is kind of the background, the information that kind of forms the foundation for those further discussions. Okay? So last time in class in our virtual notes, we looked at the Articles of Confederation and we realized they were terrible. I mean, not everything was bad. There were some good ideas, but when you started to look at the practicality of things and just the shortcomings of the Articles of Confederation, there were just so many of them that it was time to really start considering changing this, all right, and making some improvements. And a lot of the states start to send delegates to Philadelphia in May of 1787. Again, a delegate is a person who's authorized to represent other people. The only problem with that is Rhode Island doesn't send anybody. Rhode Island wanted to keep things as they were. Well, if you remember our virtual notes from last time, you needed to have all 13 states agree to amend the Articles of Confederation. But if you only have 12 of 13 states there, can you really do anything? That becomes a very prominent problem right away. Okay? And while the goal of the Constitutional Convention originally was to try and fix the Articles of Confederation, it becomes very apparent early on that fixing them is not going to be possible. And instead, we need to start with something new. We need to come up with some new ideas that will help move our country into the future and provide some stability and address a lot of the issues that are going on. Okay? So the Constitutional Convention quickly scraps the Articles and starts to work on a new constitutional government. And this is where some of the agreements were on multiple sides. So a lot of the delegates agreed the national government needs to be able to do some of these things, like having the power to tax, having federal taxes. You need to have money for a government to function. Nobody likes paying taxes, but it is a necessity for that. All right. They also realize that the federal government needs to be able to regulate trade between the states. Leaving it up to the states just does not promote economic growth, and you start to have states competing with one another in different areas and starting to charge, lay tariffs and other such things that could become very problematic. Right. They also need to be not only to be able to call up for a military, but maintain it. Right. That becomes very important because you have the threat of Great Britain in the world. You have the threat of Spain to the south and Florida. You have the threat of even France at this going on at the same time, even though they're starting to go through the French Revolution at this time. But one of the things that a lot of people I don't think realize is that most of our founding fathers and most of the delegates at the convention were against having a permanent professional military. They saw that as something that would be unnecessary and would give too much power to the national government. And we don't really have a large professional military until after World War II. Prior to that, at some points we had a very, very small military, and then you would just have soldiers that were called up during times of need, right? If there was a crisis, and that actually happens during, like the first time is during John Adams' tenure, where George Washington gets put back in charge of the Army, and Alexander Hamilton serves as kind of one of his lieutenants during that time frame. But during this convention, what they start to do is they say, like, all right, where did the Articles of Confederation go wrong, and how do we fix it? Okay, they look at their failures and they say, how do we fix these things so that we don't have these issues in the future? Right? Or maybe we don't have the same issues in the future. But they're still trying to say they're still weary of a powerful national government, right? A lot of those things that we talked about at the start of the Articles of Confederation, those things apply. And there's a lot of major issues that they need to address, but we're going to focus in on three, all right? in class. The first one is going to be representation. How are the people in the states going to be represented in the national government? There's a couple of different ideas that get proposed to that. We'll cover those here in a second. There's also the question of the chief executive, right? Articles of Confederation, no chief executive. We need a chief executive. You need somebody to enforce the law. Okay? Otherwise, it's just not going to work. They become, as Alexander Hamilton put it, mere recommendations, right, that states could choose to follow or not. The question is, how powerful do we make him? Do we make a very weak executive with not a whole lot of power that's maybe just more of a figurehead? Or, as a few people start to put, do we start to push towards monarchy? Right? Do we install a king or a queen to basically kind of come in and rule in that sense, where they have a lifetime tenure at that particular position? Again, I know that seems really strange to us, but at the time, that was the accepted way of having an executive, is you had monarchy. Okay? Nobody had ever tried a presidency before. In fact, that's something that we make up. Okay? So that becomes one of the debates. Another major debate is over the issue of slavery. Okay? What is our nation going to do about the issue of slavery? Are we going to outlaw it? Are we going to allow it to stay? Are we going to punt on it and save it for future generations? What's going to happen with that particular issue? So as a result of that, you have two rival plans that get proposed, all right, that start to address these issues in different ways. You have the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan. The Virginia plan was obviously created by Virginia, and it favored states that had a large population. So the bigger the population, the more benefits you're going to have, where the New Jersey plan favored states with a smaller population, because at the time New Jersey didn't have that large of a population. Okay? And both of these plans get proposed. We're going to take a look at those specifically a little bit more in class, but here's kind of an overview of some of the things that get created as a result of that. So under the Virginia plan, James Madison becomes a huge part of driving force behind the Virginia plan. Not the guy who actually writes it, that's William Randolph, but under the Virginia plan, it creates a bicameral legislature, a two-house Congress, okay? And the membership, the people who make up those legislatures, are based on the population's size of each state. So the bigger your state's population, the more representatives you have. Okay? So Virginia at the time was one of the largest states. It was the largest state next to New York. New York and Virginia would have the most representation in those legislatures, right? Whereas when we get to the New Jersey plan, you're going to see a totally different way to look at that. The national government would have power to levy taxes, make national laws, regulate trade, like we mentioned before. Okay? But within this two-house legislature, right? Bicameral again means two-house legislature. Unicameral means one-house legislature, right? So it creates a bicameral legislature based on proportional representation. Okay? In this, the first house gets elected by the people. So people vote for the representatives directly. Well, the second house, which actually has more of the power, the representatives from the first house nominate candidates and they get voted on by the states, right? So that you have a very kind of complicated system to try and determine how states and how the people are going to be represented in the Virginia plan. Under the New Jersey plan, William Patterson is the driving force beyond that plan. Really, you're not changing that much. Like, they keep the structure of the Articles of Confederation and add things to it and say, look, like, not everything was bad with the Articles. Okay? Yes, we needed a power to levy taxes and regulate trade and things like that. Yes, we need a national executive. Yes, slavery is an issue. Okay? But the reality is we don't want to change that much. We don't want to give up too much power to a national government. So they kind of keep the structure of the Articles of Confederation, and they create a stronger unicameral legislature, right, where each state is represented equally. One vote for each state. We call that equal representation. Yeah? So under the New Jersey plan, you have a unicameral legislature based on equal representation. And just as it kind of was under the Articles, representatives in this legislature are going to be chosen by the state legislatures. Okay? So it's representing the states, right? We're the United States of America. So After both of these get proposed, there's 3 days of debate over these two, and the states decide to take a vote. Each state's delegation only has one vote, all right, one vote apiece. 7 states vote in favor of the Virginia plan, 3 of them vote in favor of the New Jersey plan, and either the remaining states, either their delegates were split or they didn't vote. Okay, and as you can look at, even with like passing a basic thing, that super majority, we don't have that here, right? We have a majority, but not a super majority. So there's not enough to really move anywhere from here. Like neither plan is gaining enough traction to be able to become anything. And that's where we start to get into class and say, what do we do from here, right? Where do these plans go from here? So that's everything. I look forward to seeing you in class. We're going to have some great debates and discussions related to these different topics. And then we'll kind of conclude our first unit. All right, so I will see you in class.